Alright, Space Nerds, when last we left off, we had created a little beginnings of a Lua script by using the daemon screen to place a bunch of different objects, exported the script, and now we're going to customize that script to make it do something more interesting. Before we get into that, let's take a look though at the API that Space Nerds has so that we can see the kinds of things that our script can do. The Lua API is described in this lua-api.txt file that comes with Space Nerds. At the top of the file, it tells you a little few tips about debugging Lua scripts, and then about locations. You have XYZ coordinates, and it tells you which axes are which way things go. The factions that you have in Space Nerds, the kinds of ships, event types. You can register callbacks when things happen in the game, when the player respawns or dies or docks with a starbase, or when any object is destroyed or any object gets shot. And then it gets into the functions which you can call. Clear all, we've already seen from the daemon screen. It just erases everything except the player ships. You can add ships at a given position, type, faction. You can add asteroids, set asteroid speed. You can set the minerals within an asteroid. You can add a cargo container, add a derelict, etc., etc. So it's worthwhile to look through this file and see the kinds of things that you can do. All of these things were generally added as a result of trying to make little scripts, and then it's like, oh, I need it to do this. How can I get it to do that? Oh, I need some help from the game, so I add some function to do whatever it is that needs to be done. I try not to add things willy-nilly. I try to give it a little bit of thought, but I don't know how successful I was at that. But this file is definitely worth a look to figure out all the different things that you can do. With that, let's try to customize the script a bit. The basic idea I have for this script is not very fancy since it's just a demo. I thought, well, I can make a derelict and put it somewhere, and then I can have a starbase send some comms message to the player to say, hey, go investigate this derelict. And then when the player gets near to the derelict, some enemies can pop up and start shooting the player. So kind of a trap scenario. So the Lua scripts are in sharesness Lua scripts. And our script was testscript.lua. So one thing I mentioned in the last video, it doesn't clear the board. So let's go ahead and make it do that. Now it will clear the board before it begins. Now let's think about our derelict. Where do we want it? Let's see. We want our derelict location to be, let's say our derelict location equals, and now I have to remember how that works. So you give it a name, an XYZ, a ship type, and a faction. So let's say it is a disruptor, which is 12, and a Zarkon, which is 3, or let's make it a neutral, 0. So let's say that's where our ship is. We can adjust the location later. And it wanted a name, let's say yeah, it's a trap. Will be the name of the ship, and the faction was 0, and the ship type was 12. And ship type faction 0. So I got those backwards. I don't have the API memorized, as you can tell. So that will add our derelict. And now we should probably try this to make sure that it's working. So let's save it, go back to the game, and now we should be able to run our Lua script. Lua test script.lua. And is our derelict around? It's probably up here. It's probably one of these blue dots. Interesting. Low oxygen warning. So another thing we should probably do is reset our player ship. Reset player ship. I believe this should put the player in a healthy state, basically. At the beginning of the mission, it's probably good to give your player a healthy state. So that's what reset player ship does. So let's try. Yeah, now our oxygen went back up to normal. All our stuff is good. Okay, so we would like to have, after a little while, have the starbase communicate with the player ship and tell them, hey, go check out this derelict. So to do that, we want to use a timer. Register timer callback. Register the function to be callback in timer ticks, which is 1/10 of a second. And okay, so the first argument is the callback, which is the name of your function that you want it to call. This is how long from now you want it to call it, and this can be whatever you want or nothing. Okay, so exit. So we're back in our script. Let's register timer callback. First, let's see, this is let's say instructions from Starbase. And let's say we want this to start 10 seconds into the game, which would be 100/10ths of a second. And we don't really care what the cookie is. Now we have to create a function. Gotta remember how to do that in Lua. Let's look at another one. Okay, so you say function, the arguments and then end. Okay. So now let's make our function. I have this function instruction from Starbase, and it will get called back with our cookie, which we ignore. And then we want to have the starbase. So we have starbase 1 here. We want to have that send a communications to our player. So VI comms transmission. So is there another way? Okay, we'll just use comms transmission. And we want it to say I can make this message better later, but for now that will do. So this means 10 seconds into the game, once we start our script, 10 seconds into the game, we should see this comms transmission from Starbase. Let's try it. Lua test script.lua. Let's go over to comms. And we should see in 10 seconds.